We're back. I'm Ray Milano. This is the We Are Fredericksburg podcast studio. We've got a fascinating guest today. Before we get into that, wanted to let you know where to find us. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, we're on YouTube, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook. We also have our website, wearefredericksburg.com. Everything you can find is going to be We Are Fredericksburg. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube. Definitely follow our Facebook. We post some fantastic pictures of the area. We've got some event stuff going. We also have live music calendar on our website, so you can find live music in the area, who all the artists are, and plan out your evenings. Today, our guest is Jeff Small. Jeff, thanks for being here. You're an interesting guy.
I don't know about that, Ray, but thanks for having me.
Well, I think you're an interesting guy. I've heard a little bit about your story. Want to go over that in a little bit more detail today. You're the current circuit court clerk, Fredericksburg City, right?
Yep.
Okay. It's a small world in Fredericksburg. Like, you always run into people that you've known for a while, and you run into them regularly. People from different areas come, and in our case, we grew up literally walking distance from the same shopping center we visited all the time.
Yeah, Oakton.
And we went to the same high school.
Oakton High School, go Cougars.
Yeah, absolutely. So a few years apart, not much. So we didn't run into each other, but from the same area. Very cool. When you got out of high school and you went into college, really initially were trying to get set up to become a doctor.
Yeah, in high school, I took the biologies, the chemistries, the AP biology. I wanted to go to college, pre-med, and then go to med school, all for the wrong reasons. I had a friend growing up, and he lived right down the road, and every summer his parents would vacation in Martha's Vineyard, and they would take him up there for the summer. That's where their family was from. And he would come back, and this is before the internet and Facebook and social media, and he would show me pictures of his friend up there, and his friend was always riding around in a Ferrari, on the water in these great boats, living in this great house. And I was like, wow, how do they have all that? He says, well, his dad's a heart surgeon. And I said, I want to be a heart surgeon. This is 8 years old. Turns out I wanted to be a doctor for all the wrong reasons, and academics pretty much weeded me out. I never could get the chemistries, the calculuses, the organic chemistries. So when I got to college, I went from Oakton High School to Syracuse University. And I chose Syracuse because I wrestled at Oakton, loved wrestling, and I wanted to wrestle in college. And Syracuse had a world-famous coach, a guy named Gene Mills. He was a 4-time national champion. I get to Syracuse. I'm having the time of my life. I partied too hard. I wrestled too hard. I studied not enough. And after about 3 years of college, my parents paying tuition at a private university, I didn't have the credits to be a third year, a junior. So my parents were like, you're done. We're not paying for this anymore. Get your butt home. So I came home. I went to work at Fair Oaks Mall at Bennigan's, and I started taking classes at George Mason University. I left Syracuse with about a 2.1 or 2.3 GPA. Ended up doing really well at George Mason, but by the time it was all said and done, I only had about a 2.7 GPA. Like I told you before, I went up to Crown Books and Oakton Shopping Center, got the Princeton Review Guide of all the medical schools, and there's not a medical school that I could find that would take someone with a 2.7 GPA. So at that point, I had to do some soul searching and figure out what I'm going to do the rest of my life.
So you completed at George Mason, you got your...
I did. I got my BS in biology from George Mason in about 93, 94.
Right. Now, you then went and worked for a congressman. Was that right after GMU?
Well, right after GMU, I needed a job. And so I was working at a restaurant up there called Champions in Fairfax. Mm-hmm. And I applied for a job. I had a buddy that worked for Media General Cable. So I interviewed, applied for a job, and I actually got hired and was supposed to have a start date. But at about that same time, I had a lot of friends that worked on Capitol Hill, and they were having a great time up there. And that seemed like a really good professional path for me. So I made 335 or 350 resumes, gave it to every single congressional office. I didn't care if they were Republican or Democrat. I didn't know anything about politics, but it seemed like a good avenue. And I got a call. This is probably about 1994 from the congressman from Oregon. He just got elected, and he said, we've got a job for you. It pays $13,000 a year. You're going to have to work 6 days a week, about 10 hours during the week, but we're only going to make you work half a day on Saturdays, and see these huge sacks of mail that come to our office twice a day. You got to go through every letter and sort it out by issue so that it can get to the right person to address that issue. And as hard as it sounds, commuting in from Northern Virginia, working all those hours, I actually loved it.
Right.
And I, just enjoyed working up there. I mean, you get in awe when you go to work and you see the Capitol. You see the Lincoln Memorial, you see the mall, the White House is somewhere on the other side. It was just fantastic.
Like big things are happening, and
and I'm part of it, right? Yeah. Right. It's bigger than me. I worked there for 3 or 4 months, and then my resume sort of fell in the hands of the office for the congressman from Alaska, a gentleman named Don Young, who I became very good friends with, and he passed away a year or two ago. But up until his death, we stayed in touch. And it was odd, though, because they wanted to hire me not as a mail correspondent, but as a legislative assistant. And I'm like, I don't have enough experience to be this. This is like the lottery ticket. What did I do to...
Well, legislative assistant could mean anything, right?
Well, it can mean anything, but on Capitol Hill, the legislative assistants, it's a really good job. You get assigned certain issues, and you're pretty much the congressman's or congresswoman's point on those issues. Let's say your issue is defense. You'll track all the defense bills. You'll meet with constituents that have, defense issues they want to get to the congressman. You'll deal with lobbyists that lobby for the defense industry, and you'll be the congressman's sort of intake. And then you synthesize it, you update him, you write him some position papers, and that's sort of how a congressman can deal with all these issues out there. But again, I'm not qualified. I was a biology major that couldn't get into medical school, didn't have a good GPA. Worked at, almost got a job for Media General Cable, and I opened mail for 3 months. So everyone I knew, they were telling me that, Jeff, how did you get that? Why did you get that interview? I says, I don't know, but I'm showing up. So I went to the interview, and the office manager, she sat me down, and we talked for about an hour. And she just pretty much asked me a lot of questions. So where did you grow up? Well, I grew up in Fairfax County. Well, did you ever go to D.C.? Sure. How'd you get there? Well, I would take 66. I would take Route 29, Route 50. There's Georgetown Pike. And she says, well, if there was an accident on 66, which would you do? And we went through all these scenarios. She says, okay, the interview went great. I'm like, okay. And they didn't think in my mind. They didn't ask me one question about government, politics, what's going on here.
Yeah.
Policies. Well, I got a second interview. And this time I interviewed with the congressman's wife, Mrs. Young. And Mrs. Young pretty much focused the interview on my family. Are you close with your family? You close with your mom, your brothers and sisters? What do you guys, do for vacations? I guess I gave her the answer she was looking for because I got a call from the office manager saying, come on in. We'd like to offer you a job. You'll have a couple legislative assistant issues, but Mr. Young, he's getting older. He has a hard time seeing at night. So we'd like, if you'd be willing to, would you pick Mr. Young up on his way to work and then drive him home after work? And I said, this sounds great, sure. And instead of $13,000, a year I was making at the congressman from Oregon's office, they were going to pay me $18,000, and looks like I was going to have Saturdays off. So it was a win-win. I took the job. They gave me a couple of issues that I would track for the congressman, but mostly I would pick him up in the morning. I would take him to work. If he had to go to meetings during the day, outside the Capitol, he was in the Rayburn building. But if he had to go to meetings elsewhere in Washington, I'd give him a ride there. And then at night, I would take him home. And one of the good things is everybody knows how bad traffic is in the morning up in that area, getting into D.C. Mr. Young didn't like traffic. So Mr. Young said, come pick me up at 10 a.m. We usually don't start, doing our House bills and the legislative floor session until about 11. So come pick me up at 10. And I was like, this is awesome. I get to sleep in. I get to avoid traffic. Well, there's a flip side to it. A lot of people don't know, but congressmen and congresswomen, they stay and they vote till sometimes 1, 2, 3 in the morning. So I would have to stay and wait in the office till he was done and take him home. But there was a couch in the office, so I would sit down and I would rest to make sure I was awake enough to drive him home. And it was a great job. We became great friends. He had his politics, and not everybody agreed with them. But me and him didn't really talk about politics. We talked about life, and he would tell me stories about when he was in high school, and he played football at Chico State University, and his dream was to play for the San Francisco 49ers, but he was never good enough. Then he went to Alaska, and he was a professional trapper. He used to trap, mink, I think it was mink, and sell the pelts and ran for mayor, moved up to Alaska through their politics, and then ended up becoming congressman.
That's an interesting job. So you're doing a lot of driving for the congressman. You ended up transitioning out of becoming a driver.
I did.
And then getting into something else. So what sparked that?
Yeah, well, so Mr. Young and his wife, they said, Mr. Young likes to get in a clean car. So I said, okay, I use this car wash in Fairfax. It's called Embassy Car Wash. And I would just go to Embassy Car Wash, twice a day. Now, something in my brain, I don't know what it was. I knew I was never going to hit my financial goals, or subconsciously, I knew I was never going to hit my financial goals working on Capitol Hill at $18,000 a year. And I knew I really didn't want to have like an office job. I didn't want to wear a suit and tie every day, even though look at me now. So I just felt there was something I wanted to do. Well, I was at Embassy Car Wash a couple times, and I'm waiting in line, and there's like 3 or 4 cars in front of me, 2, 3 cars behind me, 2, 3 cars, 4 cars in the tunnel, and however many cars getting wiped down. And I says, I'm here 20 minutes. I'm counting so far, 3, 6, 9, maybe 11, 12 cars, times their cheapest wash, $7, $8. That's X amount an hour, times they're open 11 hours a day, but they probably only, do business maybe 8 of those hours, times 7 days a week. Well, maybe it rains, 1 day a week. And I guess, for lack of a better word, it was car wash dummy math. And I said, I don't want to work in a suit and tie on Capitol Hill forever, and I can't be a doctor, so maybe I can run a car wash. And, that was just sort of going through my mind for some months, and I says, well, let me look into this. So I would drive around Fairfax County, and I would look for an acre of land, and there's a sign on it for sale, whatever developer or corporation owned it. And I'd call them up, and I'd say, hi, my name's Jeff Small, I want to open up a car wash. Can I buy your land? And I was so green. They knew I had no idea what I was doing. And I pretty much got hung up on 10 out of 10 times. I would call the car wash equipment manufacturers that I knew of. And back then, I really only knew of 2, Ballinger and Hannah Sherman. And they both said, look, you're nice. You're 22 years old. You told us already you only have $200 in your bank account. It's pretty expensive to open up a car wash. When you got experience or you got more money, come back to us. Well, then I would call banks and I would say, hi, my name's Jeff Small. I'm 22. I'd like to open up a car wash. Can I borrow $1 million, $2 million, whatever it was, dollars? And they would hang up on me as well. Finally, one of the bankers said, look, you seem really nice. You seem like you want to do this. Talk to your parents. You're going to need someone that has credit, that maybe has assets, that has collateral. Maybe they'll put up the house. Maybe they'll put up, money they have. But you're not going to get any traction, until you find somebody, that's going to help you out with this. So my parents were divorced. I went to my dad. My dad was a dentist in Northern Virginia, and we were upper middle class. And I said, Dad, I want to open up a car wash. He looked at me and he says, no. I've taught you my whole life. We're old Jews from Brooklyn, and we believe you make your living through a professional life. So you can be an accountant, you can be a lawyer, you can be a doctor, but.
So education is really important.
It was all through education. And I says, well, God, Dad, I can't be a doctor. I don't want to be an accountant. I hate lawyers. I really want to do this car wash thing. He's like, leave me alone. So I kind of wore him down over the next few months. And I talked him into going to what's called the International Car Washes Association's annual convention. And at that year, I forget what year it was, but it was in Orlando. So Dad's like, okay, if this will finally get Jeff out of my hair about this, I'll go to Orlando and we'll do the thing. We'll come back, and then I'll get him to go to law school or be an accountant or whatever the path would be. Well, we get off the plane, we check in the hotel, we walk into the convention center, and there it is. You've got the red carpet. You've got all the brand new equipment with the bells and the whistles and the lights, and the electric's on, and the cloth is moving back and forth. We probably weren't more than 3 steps in there, and Dad looked at me. He's like, we're doing a car wash. I said, yes. So we spent the next couple days walking around just in awe of all this huge equipment and everything this industry has. And we get back, and Dad says, okay, we're going to try to find some land. We're going to try to do this. But it's really, really hard. Anybody that's never developed commercial property, just talk to somebody that has. They'll tell you finding the right site is, really, really difficult. Getting under contract, super difficult. The seller's got their piece of land they think is worth all this money and they want to sell it. You have your business plan and you're like, well, I can't really afford that much and I need all these time to get permits, and they don't want to hear that. We probably spent a year or two unsuccessfully, or maybe a year unsuccessfully, finding anything in Fairfax County. But then a broker named Bill Bush came to us and he says, have you guys ever heard of Fredericksburg? There's a gentleman named Carl Silver that's building a huge shopping center in Fredericksburg called Central Park. Whoa, stop, Bill. We don't want to go to Maryland. We want to stay in Virginia. Bill shook his head. And he says, no, not Fredericksburg, just south of Quantico, before Richmond. We're like, oh, okay, Fredericksburg. Up until then, if you would have told me that Northern Virginia and the rest of Virginia are kind of two separate states, I wouldn't have believed you, but that was my aha moment. And I say that in jest. We are all one state, but the Northern Virginians, they had their mindset, and now I consider myself a Fredericksburgian, and the rest of the state, we have our mindset. So we said, well, we'll love to meet Mr. Silver. So we arranged a meeting, and me and Dad drove down to Fredericksburg, and we actually met with Judd Honecker. And we sat around this little table, and Judd had his pad, and he pulled out these blueprints, and he says, okay, so here's Route 3. You go into Central Park this way, and you go all the way to the back. And when you think you're at the back, you're not quite at the back yet. Make that little bend, and you're all the way in the back. And there's a Merchant's Tire there, and there's a piece of land in front of it, and an Ethan Allen in front of that. We want to put a car wash here. There's a guy from Maryland that, we're talking to, and he wants to put a car wash, but he hasn't committed. So if you guys want to do a car wash there, we'd love to have you. And we say to him, well, you got anything a little closer to Route 3? And he's like, nope, this is it. You want a car wash? This is where it's going to be. So we started talking numbers. And Judd said, well, you want to buy the land, or do you want to do a build to suit? We'll build it to you. We'll build you your building, and then we'll rent it back to you. And we said, well, we want to buy the land, of course. He's like, okay, it's, and I can't remember what the price was, but whatever it was, we couldn't afford it. So we said, well, how about a build to suit? And he says, okay, but we usually require some money down in order to do this. I mean, yours is a big project. It's an acre of land, and of course, like I said, sellers think their land is super valuable. So Judd thinks his land is super valuable. And it turned out Judd was right, it was. And then we had this really nice building. Anybody that's listening to this that's been in Central Park and has seen the Santa Fe car wash, that was mine and Dad's concept. We have the nice barrel tile roof, the arches, the ephes and stucco. We've really built a beautiful car wash. And Judd says it's going to cost a lot of money to build, and you'll have your lease, but in order to protect our interests, we need some money down. And I said, sure, how much? And he threw out a number that there's no way we could have afforded. So he looked at it, he says, well, how much money do you have? And Dad says, I have $50,000. And I'm like, wow, that's a lot of money. Well, right. Judd just started shaking his head. He's like, I'm sorry, guys. You're really nice, but I just don't think this deal is going to work. Well, all of a sudden, Carl Silver walks in the room, and he's got his yellow notepad. Anybody that knows Carl knows he never went anywhere without his yellow notepad. And he says, hey, Judd, is this the Small family? And Judd says, yeah. And he says, they want to do the car wash? And Judd says, yeah, but I don't think the deal's going to work. At that moment, Carl said something kind of under his breath, but not really. And he said it in Yiddish. And for those of you who don't know what Yiddish is, it's sort of a dialect that comes from Germany and Eastern Europe that a lot of Jews spoke, back in the day. Well, my dad, growing up in Brooklyn, and his parents were immigrants from Eastern Europe, he picked up a little bit of Yiddish. So he responded to Carl. Well, Carl's eyes popped wide open, and Carl's like, how did you know what I just said? And my dad says, well, I grew up in Brooklyn. And Carl says, are you Jewish? And my dad said, yeah. And so him and my dad had this wonderful conversation, not very long, maybe 2-3 minutes. Carl looked at Judd, and Carl says, make the deal happen. And wow, so we're going to have a car wash. So we left that meeting. And Dad asked Judd, well, what's the timeline? Judd says, maybe 2-3 years. We've got to finish some infrastructure. We've got to do X, Y, and Z, start the construction. The construction will take 6, 8, 9 months. So, we're looking at 2 to 3 years. So we get out of there, we're in the car, and Dad says, so you really want to do this car wash? I said, yeah, I do. And he says, you're going to work hard? And I said, of course I am. And he says, okay, we've got 2 to 3 years. You're going to law school. I said, Dad, growing up, you taught me to hate lawyers. And Dad, it worked. I hate lawyers. Why?
But you couldn't become a doctor. So.
I couldn't become a doctor, yeah. But Dad looked at me and he says, yeah, I still hate lawyers. He's like, but it's good to have one in the family. So I says, oh gosh, here we go again. I said, Dad, there's no one that's going to let, somebody with a 2.7 GPA into law school. He's like, law school is not like medical school. There's a law school for everybody. And I'm like, yeah, that's what he's saying. Because you're a dentist, you're a doctor. You guys think you're better than everyone else.
So it's back to Crown Books.
So it's back to Crown Books. It's getting the updated Princeton Review book. And sure enough, of course I didn't go through the first 90% of the book with the Harvards, the Yales, the Georgetowns. I skipped right to the back. And I found a school in Fort Lauderdale called Nova Southeastern. I had family down there, so I knew I would have a support network. Took the LSATs. Didn't really do any better on the LSATs than I did on my GPA, but I was lucky. I got into law school. Let me tell you about my first day of law school. I go down there. I check in. I forget what the registration process was, but then they send you to the bookstore to buy your books. And then I was living in a dorm because I didn't know anything about housing. So I go to my dorm room, put all my books away, get in my car, and I just start driving around looking for a car wash. The first car wash I found, I went in, I applied for a job, and while I was in law school, I worked at a Sonny's car wash. I started vacuuming cars, wiping cars down, detailing cars, and for the next 2.5 years, that's how I learned how to wash cars.
Very cool. So you're doing school full-time to become a lawyer, working at a car wash, knowing you're in the process of opening up a car wash. Did you get school done? You passed the bar and all that before you opened?
Yeah, it was interesting. I guess my brain just isn't wired for sciences and math. But when I got to law school, I just loved it. I loved reading the cases. I loved doing the outlines, the exams. They were all essay exams. I loved my trial advocacy class. I took a trial advocacy class, and it was just a lot of mock trials. And, you've got a pretend client, and, you sit there at your table, and you've prepared your case, and you argue it to the judge. You call your witnesses. You make your opening and closing arguments. I loved it. It was so much fun. Well, I graduated law school actually with honors, and which shocked me and my family. But I graduated, came back to Virginia, passed the bar, and it sort of coincided. The bar was given in July. The car wash had opened up in April, so I'm working at the Santa Fe Car Wash in Central Park, having the time of my life, and studying for the bar. Passed the bar, and I went down to the city of Fredericksburg's district court and juvenile and domestic relations court, and I said, hey, I'm a new lawyer in Virginia, and I'll represent some indigent clients. I've got a car wash in Central Park, Santa Fe Car Wash. I was so proud of that. I told everybody, but I'd like to help some people. So they would send me, 2 to 3 cases a month, and I would get to in the middle of the day or in the morning at the car wash. I'd wear my khaki pants. I'd have my blue Oxford button-down shirt with the Santa Fe Car Wash, patch on it, and I'd put on my blue blazer, cover the patch, go to the courthouse, meet with my clients, try their case, settle their case, work with the prosecutors. I just loved criminal defense work. It was great. I got to do my 2 to 3 cases at a time. I got to run my car wash. It could have been some of the best professional years of my life.
Was there a time you thought maybe I'd prefer to do just the lawyer side of things and push the car wash to the side?
Not only, Ray, was there never a time I thought that. I would see lawyers, and some of them would say, man, you're so lucky you got a business. Law is a grind. We chug and we grind and we chug and we grind, and most of us don't get rich. And it's, a lot of lawyers get burnt out.
It's a huge expense to get the education.
Yeah, it was. I took a lot of loans. I always felt financially I would end up further ahead in business, in the car wash, than I would as a lawyer. It never pulled me, to become a full-time lawyer. I love the little bit amount of law I practiced, but that kept it fresh for me. And I never burnt out a law, and a lot of lawyers burn out.
You're going into 2 different industries, like green.
Yeah, pretty much.
In law and in a car wash industry. You picked up some stuff in Florida working at car washes, but becoming a business owner, running a business, and becoming a lawyer all at the same time.
Yeah, and I knew nothing about business. I'd never taken a business class, never had owned a business, never really worked for a business except as a laborer.
I think that's the story of most business owners.
Yeah?
Certainly in all the construction trades that I've been in.
Yeah.
And I've talked to a lot of other business owners, and it's some story that led them down that path to becoming a business owner, but it wasn't something they necessarily set out to do.
Yeah, at the end of the month, if I had more money, if I took in more money than we spent, it was a great month.
Right.
And it was tough in the beginning in the back of Central Park. Cowan Boulevard hadn't been built yet, which extended it to Route 1, and a lot of traffic comes in there. There was no McDonald's, no Starbucks, no Tito's Diner. On the other side, there was no Walmart. That was a huge field. I think Mr. Silver used to put on fireworks there for 4th of July or somewhere around there. And the road did cut through to Fly Hill Avenue, but nobody used that. So in the beginning, we really didn't have a lot of traffic back there. I was the manager, I was the vacuum supervisor, I was the drive the cars on supervisor, the drive the cars off supervisor, the oil change supervisor. I mean, I wore every hat every day. And we weren't making a lot of money the first couple of years, just enough to barely hang in there. But we saw Central Park building around us. And as it built around us, revenue kept going up. Car counts kept going up. I had a credit card for the company. It's all my meals, because I was working 7 days a week. So whether it was breakfast, lunch, or dinner, I was living in Alexandria at the time, and I was down in Fredericksburg, and I'd go to Central Park Diner or IHOP, and I'd have lunch. And I got to meet Doc Wilhelm that owned it, and Central Park Diner, there was the guys that owned that. And I became friends with them and supported their business, and they started supporting the car wash. For lunch, I would go to Tia's Tex-Mex and some of the other ones there, and got to know those guys and support their business. They would support mine. So Central Park back then was just a really cool community. And everybody sort of got to know each other. We rooted for each other. We were in the beginning steps of what Central Park in Fredericksburg was to become.
Who do you think was a role model or somebody that kind of stood next to you, helped you out a little bit from time to time, understanding business or P&L statements or profitability or growth?
Yeah, there's 3 people that if it wasn't for, the grace of God or whoever you believe in, I would never have been able to get in the car wash business. The first is my dad. And you heard the story how he went out on a limb. He basically personally guaranteed everything. So if I screwed this thing up, not only was I out of a job, but Dad would lose everything and end up, cleaning teeth for Carl Silver for the next 10 years.
Right.
The second person was a man named Paul Fazio and his father, Sonny. I told you before I worked for Sonny's Car Wash. When I was working there, I had no idea they made equipment. I would also drive around South Florida and go to every car wash I could find and ask for the owner and say, hey, my name's Jeff. I want to get in the car wash business. Any advice? And I met a family called the Pomerantzes. They had a car wash in Sawgrass Hills Mall. Their advice was, well, have you picked equipment? And I'm like, yeah, me and Dad gave a deposit to a company called Ballinger. They're like, get your deposit back. Eat the deposit. You've got to go with Sonny's. I'm like, no, not the car wash. I work at the car. So like, no, they make equipment. I'm like, really? So they got on the phone. They called Paul Fazio, who was the owner his father was the owner of the company, but Paul worked for him, and Paul was running the company. And Paul says, well, Jeff, why don't you come down? When's good for you? So we picked a date. I drive down to their warehouse and their manufacturing where they make everything. And I park and I'm walking up the steps, and out the door walks this old man. And he's like, can I help you? And I says, yes, my name's Jeff Small. I'm supposed to meet with Paul Fazio. He's like, yeah, Paul's on a call, but let me give you a tour of the factory. So Sonny was giving me a tour of the factory, and he was showing me all this World War II machinery equipment he bought. And he says, see this? This was used to make X in World War II, and this was used to make something else, and I've converted, and that's how I make these big aluminum things, and this is how we make our cloth, and this is how we make our spinny wrappers, and, gave me the tour for about an hour, and then he took me to Paul's office. And Paul sat down, and he said, and I told my dad, and we were going to conference call in my dad, and Paul talked to me a little bit, and he says, well, why do you want to get into the car wash business? Why don't you want to you're in law school, why don't you want to be a lawyer? And I just told him my story, just like I told you. And he says, okay, let's call your dad. So we called Dad, we get Dad on speakerphone. Paul says, Dr. Small, I just spent a little bit of time talking to your son, and we want to do anything we can to help you. I just got off the phone with a doctor from Atlanta the other day who wanted to open up a car wash for his son. And I told the doctor, look, your son doesn't want to be there. Save your money. Put it in the stock market, don't waste your money. And he's like, but I'm not telling you that. He goes, we're going to do everything we can to help you and Jeff be successful. They really stuck by that. We ended up buying the equipment off of them. They came up, they did the installation. They provided all the support we needed. They gave me their personal phone numbers. I could call them 7 days a week, and ask them, I'm having this problem. What do I do if a customer says I broke their antenna? What do I do if this machine doesn't work? What do I do if this chemical's not working? And they were just experts in the industry. And then the final component is I told you the story about Carl Silver. And without Carl looking at Judd and saying, make the deal happen, we would have never have opened. And after we opened, Carl used to come in. He had this blue Cadillac. And Carl would come and get his car washed maybe once or twice a week. He would get out while we were vacuuming it, and me and Carl would sit and talk. He'd come in the office. Then when his car was done, my staff would come in and say, Mr. Silver, your car's done. He would just teach me, he's like, well, Jeff, do you know what an amortization table is? I said, no, I have no idea. And he would teach me what that is. And then I would say, Mr. Silver, I can you teach me more? And so I would start going to his office. Can't remember the frequency, but I would go to his office. And then he would invite me to his house, and we'd sit in his library. And I said, Carl, you have all these books on your wall. You read all these books, and I'm thinking, this guy is like the most successful business guy I've ever met. He's built everything in Fredericksburg. He's, everyone says how rich he is. He must be brilliant. I says, Carl, have you read all these books? He's like, Jeff, I don't have time to read books. The interior designer put all these books up there. I haven't read any of them. And I said, I'm thinking to myself, gosh, thank God I'm not the only one that doesn't like to read. But Carl would talk to me and help me, and I got to know his wife, Maxine. His son, Larry, was also involved in the business, and I got to know Larry. And without Carl, and Larry and Judd, again, I would have never been able to get in the business. Definitely, if I found a win, wouldn't have been as successful. And so those are the three that I owe everything to.
How long did you do Santa Fe Car Wash?
We opened up in 98, and then in 2004, the Asian community out of Northern Virginia decided they want to be in car washing. So there's brokers that help them find businesses, and they were buying all the car washes up in Northern Virginia. And they were paying a lot of money for them. And I was like, wow, what if they ever came down to Fredericksburg? We're probably too far out of their market. Well, the phone rang, and a broker came down and said, we have a client that wants to buy your car wash. And I says, well, we're not really for sale. This is okay. They're willing to pay X. And I was just thinking, oh my God, this car wash isn't worth that much money. And I'm thinking about the revenue we did, the previous year. And it turned out it was a 13 multiple. Well, I called Dad, I called Paul Fazio, I called Carl Silver. And I said, these people, they want to buy our car wash. Everyone said, Jeff, sell as fast as you can. That multiple just doesn't exist. You're never going to do better than that. Sell, build more car washes, do something else, but this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So in 2004, we sold. About a year before, Carl and Judd came to us, and they said, hey, up on Route 17, just after Plantation Drive in front of the post office, we've got an acre. We think it'd make a great car wash. Do you guys want it? And we said, yeah, we'd like to build a car wash there. And they said, do you want to buy the land, or you want to do a build to suit? And we said, well, no more renting. Carl had come to us, and he had sold us the property in Central Park. And now we're landowners, we're business owners, and it felt great. So we told him, we said, we want to buy it. He's like, okay, we'll go to the bank and get a loan. And so we started talking to some banks. Nobody wanted to lend us money. And we go back to Judd, and we said, Judd, no one wants to lend us money. He's like, well, Carl started financing. He'll be the bank. And we said, that's great. Judd says, okay, the land is X. We're 20% down. Do you have that? And my dad says, we don't have that much money. And Judd says, how much do you have? Dad said, $50,000. Judd laughed and Judd says, I've heard that before. But he made the deal happen. So we sold Santa Fe Car Wash in 2004. We had bought the land on 17 in about 2003, and we applied for the permits. This time, we built our own building. We hired Warren Flynn Contracting Company. We had a great superintendent. His name was Sean Kemp, and we built the car wash. And that is what started Rio Car Wash. When we sold Santa Fe, we sold the name as well. And we love that Southwest motif. You'll see the Rio Car Wash looks very similar to the Santa Fe Car Wash, but we opened that up. And I said, Dad, there's guys around the country. They're opening 2, 3, 4 sites. I'd like to have 4 sites. My dad said, you're crazy. You're going to overextend yourself. Be successful at one. I says, I don't think so, Dad. I'm going to look in Richmond. So I found a broker, and he found me a great site on Hull Street in Genito. And I opened up Rio Car Wash number 2. And while we were under construction, another broker came to me, and he found me another site in Richmond. We opened that. Opened up 2 more in Virginia Beach, and then eventually came back up here and opened up 2 more here, one in Massaponax and one on Plank Road. The whole time, me and Dad always had this agreement. We called it the car wash umbrella. And anytime any one of us did anything car washing, we would offer the other, hey, do you want to be a partner in this? 50-50, very equal. And when I went to Richmond, Dad says, you're overextending yourself and you shouldn't do it. I don't want anything to do with it. And I'm advising you not to. Well, I did. And it turns out those 2 washes down there did fantastic. So then I did Virginia Beach. And then Dad said, no, I don't want anything to do with that. That's too far away. You'll never be able to manage anything that far away. Don't ruin, these 3 great washes we have. I said, oh no, Dad, these are great locations, and we're starting to get an infrastructure. We're starting to get really good management. Dad, I think we can do this. He's like, I don't want anything to do with this. So I opened up the 2 in Virginia Beach. Then Judd comes back to us and he says, I'm building this shopping center called Cosmos Corner, Route 1 South in Spotsylvania. I've got a great site. It's next to Wawa. Do you guys want it? And Dad now is seeing the success we're having in Stafford. He's seeing how great Richmond and Virginia Beach are doing. And Dad says, I want in on this. So me and Dad went 50-50 in Massaponics, which turned out to be our best wash. Washed the most amount of cars, made the most amount of money. Things were good. Then I found another site in Richmond on Broad Street. And Dad says, I don't really want 50-50. I'm getting older. I want to keep some of my cash to do some of the things I've always wanted to do. But, I'll take 30% of that. I think it's somewhere between 25 and 33%. I can't remember. So Dad became a partner in that on Broad Street. And then, between that and Massaponics, everything's going well. Judd comes to us and he says, I got a site on Plank Road. And it's sort of across from the bowling alley. And he says, there's already a car wash in front of the bowling alley. So I've always used this consultant, and I call the consultant up to do what they call a site assessment. And he spends 2 to 3 days. He looks at all the demographics. He drives up and down the highway. He visits the competition. He talks to customers at, the Wawa and say, how often do you wash your car? He does a really thorough job. And he said, open up that car wash. Route 3 is a busy road. Spotsylvania is a busy county. It's growing. Spotsylvania County and Route 3 can support both of you. And I said, cool. So Dad said he wanted in that, so we built that. Well, before we were even done building, we're now in 2021. We're at the stage now in the car wash industry where I would say maybe private equity, spotted car washes. And private equity said, we want, to take over this business. So private equity started buying up car washes all over the country. And they would call me every now and then. I'd say, no, look, I'm in my 40s. I'm not ready to sell. I love what I do. Financially, I'm doing better than I ever thought I would. I'm just not ready to sell. I'll call you when I'm ready. But they're pretty persistent. They keep coming back. Finally, one of them said, hey, look, I'm going to be in Fredericksburg. We at least sit down and have a cup of coffee with me. I know you work at the courthouse. Across the street's the Courtyard Marriott. They got a little Starbucks. I'm like, how did you know I work at the courthouse? And he said, come on, we do our research. So I sat down with him and I said, no, I don't want to sell. And he says, come on, everybody has a number. And so I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I just need to get this guy, out of my life. So kind of figured pretty much what other guys in the country were selling their car washes for that had similar operations to me, rounded up, added 30%, figured future revenue, and came up with a number so big I thought the guy would go away. Well, he looks at me and he says, yeah, I think we can do that. Let me go talk to the CEO and I'll get back to you in a day or 2. And I was like, what the hell's going on here? So I go home and my girlfriend Wendy's sitting on the couch. Says, Wendy, I might have just sold Rio Car Wash. She goes, what are you talking about? So I get my dad on speakerphone. And I said, told Dad what happened. And I told him that. He's like, don't worry, they'll never call you back. He's just saying that. And I'm like, okay, good, because I really don't want to sell. Well, a day or 2 later, he calls me back. He says, I'd like to fly in with the CEO, and we'd like to sit down to give you an offer letter. And I says, look, I don't want to sell. I said, if that offer letter is for 1 penny less than the number I told you, please don't, waste your money on flight and hotel and getting here. He's like, no, it's the number you said. And I said, okay, but there's no negotiation. I don't want you to whittle me down and say, well, you're doing this and we need to do that and you need new equipment or there's this issue or that issue. I says, I really don't have time for that. I don't want that. I don't need that stress in my life. He says, no, you're good. And so they flew in and their CEO sat across from me and he handed me the letter. I looked it over, read it, and it was very short. It's a 1-page, letter of intent. And I said, I looked at him, I looked back, I read it again. And he's like, you okay? And I was like, it was almost too good to be true. So I looked at him and I said, well, what's the next step? He says, you need to sign it. And your dad needs to sign it. I said, okay, I'm going to talk to my dad, have him come down, go over it with him. So Dad came down, we went over the letter. We showed it to an attorney and the attorney says, it looks legit. So we signed the letter and 60 days later, we had sold Rio Car Wash.
This episode is sponsored by Long's Embroidery. You guessed it, they do embroidery. They also do so much more. They've got a printer that prints out decals and stickers that can go on storefronts, they can go on vehicles, any glass. They also do monogramming, they do press-on patches. They also do silk screening, which is a very cool process. They can do multiple colors, they lay down the screens, they pull the paint, they push it back, they rotate it, it goes through a flash dryer. I've been using Long Embroidery for over 4 years. They have awesome staff, good turnaround times, they care about the quality, they can touch up images and logos, which they've done for us here with We Are Fredericksburg. If you are in county government, city government, if you're working with schools, sports teams, any organizations, churches, definitely small business, these are the people you want to go to and count on. They've got great pricing that's very competitive, but you can't beat the quality. Long's Embroidery. Thanks, guys.
Your stories, Jeff, remind me of watching Netflix series where they'll switch to a couple different characters because there's a storyline going over there. But while you've got your storyline with Rio Car Washes, you've also got stuff going on in the city of Fredericksburg. You were practicing law, but then you got into working directly for the city.
Yeah, so practicing law, you have to deal with the clerk's office. They're who set the cases. They're who you file your papers with. They're who get you copies of certified orders and everything else. If you're in the real estate side of law, you really need the clerk's office. That's where all the deeds are filed, the mortgages are filed, the deeds of trusts, the judgments are filed. And the city of Fredericksburg had a really great general district court. The clerk was a guy named Roy Schmidt, and he was just out to help people. The juvenile court had a great clerk. The circuit court, though, it was tough. You'd walk in there and nobody wanted to help you. You would look through this thick plexiglass and you're like, my gosh, I feel like I'm in a pawn shop. And when you wanted papers or they had papers to give you, you'd have to slide them under through this thing. They get all crinkled up and you're just, my gosh. When you walked in, you were in this vestibule. You'd walk in the door, the window was to your right, there were some chairs along the wall to your left in this narrow little foyer, and then there was a locked door. So you walked in, you couldn't really even get into the clerk's office. You were stuck in this thing. And besides the fact that they were just mean to you, they didn't return phone calls, they didn't really care about your filings, they didn't care about you. It was just really tough. So I said to myself, I says, I could run a business, and I'm just going to apply the legal knowledge I have, and my business skills to this office. And I think I can turn this office around. I think I can make this office, as happy as I make my car wash customers and employees, I'll create a great culture for the employees of the clerk's office. And we'll make the customers of the clerk's office, just as happy. And so I looked into it. And I went to talk to Carl Silver. I says, Mr. Silver, I really want to run for clerk. He's like, okay, that sounds interesting. I know you're a lawyer. He's like, how much does the job pay? And I says, Carl, it pays $70,000. He's like, it's not bad. He's like, let me ask you a question, though. You say the office isn't running well. If you do a great job and turn that office around and you make it the best clerk's office in the state, they're going to give you a raise? He says, no, Carl, it doesn't work that way. It's a government job with a budget. And he's like, okay, I get that. He's like, if you can do such a good job and you have such great management there, can you open up some more clerk's offices and make $70,000 each at those? I was like, no, Carl, it doesn't work that way. This is government. Every city and county, they have their own clerk's office. Fredericksburg only has one. He says, Jeff, you're crazy. Don't run for clerk. You go out and you build more car washes. You're doing great there. You tell me you love doing it. You do that. And I was like, okay.
And this was back in 2000?
This is about 2003, 4.
Okay.
Yeah, 2003 or 4. And I took Carl's advice, and it was great advice. You heard how, I was able to sell Santa Fe and build a whole bunch of Rio car washes. But then I got the itch. And in about 2010, 2009, I said, I really want to turn this office around. I want to show the world that government can be efficient, come in under budget, give great customer service, and can just be a place that people don't loathe to go. Because nobody wants to go to the DMV. Nobody wants to go to the courthouse. Nobody, that's just, our perception of government. And I says, I'm going to change this one department in one city, and I'm going to show them that, government can be good. And hopefully, here's the naivety of me, and then other departments will pick it up. Well, I knew that it would be tough to convince the electorate, hey, vote for me, What's my experience? I've run car washes. Yeah, I could tell I'm a lawyer and I did the pro bono work, but I felt that I needed to get more under my belt, so that the voters of Fredericksburg had confidence in who they were electing. I believed in me, but I needed them to believe in me. So the prosecutor at the time, the Commonwealth attorney, was a woman named LaBravia Jenkins. And I had known her because I'm a defense attorney. She's the prosecutor. We're button heads, but she was great to work with. She was always fair. She would always help me out. And she'd be like, Jeff, when you're doing this, might want to file this type of motion. But she was running for her boss, Charlie Sharp, had retired. He stepped down from Commonwealth attorney so he could become a circuit court judge. She had stepped into the role since she was his chief deputy, but she had to run in a special election. And man, was it a tough special election. She ran against a really good lawyer, a young man who's from Fredericksburg, and she was the underdog. I had worked on Capitol Hill, like I told you. I had learned how to campaign. So she comes to me on the street on Princess Anne Street one day, and she says, Jeff, I really need help. Will you help me on my campaign? And I loved campaigning. So I said, sure, I'll help you out. We ran a very good campaign, and we won by 34 votes. Now, her opponent did the right thing. He ran against her again because when it's that close, anything can happen. Fortunately, the second time he ran against her, we won by, a little more of a cushion. So I said to her, LaBravia, I've been talking about running for clerk. She says, of course, and I'll endorse you. You have my support. Thank you for your help. I've been impressed with what you've done as a lawyer. You've done, a great job with the car washes. I believe that, you have the knowledge and the base to do the things you want to say you want to do at the clerk's office. I said, well, here's the thing, LaBravia. I'd like to become a volunteer prosecutor in your office. She goes, well, why? It's volunteer. It doesn't pay. I said, I know, but if I can prove to the electorate that I can handle the job as a prosecutor and I can do a really good job applying justice fairly to those that need it on that end of the spectrum, but then also be able to say, hey, well, this kid who just got caught stealing a pack of gum from 7-Eleven shouldn't go to jail for 2 years. Sure, he should be punished, but let's find the right punishment, community service, restitution, whatever it be. I said, LaBravia, if I can show the people that I'm capable of doing that and that I can succeed at doing that, I would like to use that in my campaign. She says, absolutely. So she assigned me mostly to the Juvenile and Domestic Relations Court. And every Wednesday I would go down there, I would take off from the car wash, and I would prosecute domestic violence offenders in the morning and deal with children under 18 who were being charged with committing crimes. I would prosecute them. I worked with a detective back then, Rashawn Coles, who has ended up moved his way up, and just watching his career, it's been a lot of fun because he's such a good hard worker. But I prosecuted those. She also let me handle, since I was going to run for circuit court clerk in 2012, she let me do some of the probation violation dockets in circuit court. And circuit court under Judge Gordon Willis, it's the real deal. I mean, he's so professional. He's so knowledgeable. He comes from a line of lawyers and judges. He runs his docket, perfectly, and it's fast. And for a guy like me, who's never really done a lot of circuit court work on the defense side or the prosecution side, I learned really fast to sink or swim. It was a challenge, but I managed to learn how to do that. And then in 2011, I announced my candidacy. And again, I told you I love campaigning. I ran a campaign the best I could, and the voters chose me with 77% of the vote. And I became circuit court clerk. Although I had the business experience, I had the lawyer experience, I had the prosecutor experience, I never ran a clerk's office. So the Supreme Court is very supportive. They sent a team of 2 to help us out in our first week. And without them, we wouldn't have been able to operate. But they taught us the basics. And I told my staff, I said, look, we're going to learn how to receipt a fine. We're going to learn how to record a land record. But one thing that we have to do from day one is we have to treat people with respect. We have to return phone calls within half a day. Same with emails. You can't let people just, not know. I says, even if we have bad news, even if we can't help them today, we have to let them know. We have to say, look, don't have your answer today, but we are working on it. It was that communication or over communication, that I really stressed. And when the Supreme Court came up, they have a list of all the circuit court clerk's offices in Virginia, and there's 120 of them. And they show me the list. And out of 120, Fredericksburg was like 117. So I said, what can we do to be the best? I want Fredericksburg to have the best circuit court clerk's office in the state. They said, well, you need to really utilize technology. You need to go digital. You need to work close with your judges. You need to work close with your sheriff and your prosecutor and the defense attorneys and the civil attorneys to make sure that the wheel just run smooth. And I says, I'm willing to do that. Well, within 6 months, I'd clean the office up. And then within 2 to 3 years, maybe 4 years, Fredericksburg went from 117 to number 1. And that was a great feeling. And every year since, I have, except during COVID, I had the Supreme Court send their case analytics team to our office. They drive up from Richmond, and they present us with all the case statistics. And they rank us among all the courts in Virginia. And for the last 8 or 9 years, we're number 1, and I'm really proud of that. I'm proud that Fredericksburg has, the smoothest, best-running circuit court clerk's office in the state.
What do you attribute that to?
Well, my staff.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
I definitely understand it takes the people.
Yeah.
It's a leadership, and there's a lot of leaderships in a lot of different parts of government. Is it the business side? Is it understanding like process, procedures, implementation, execution? Is it experience that you have executing where you don't see these roadblocks and you're just like, let's get these things done?
So everybody has different personalities and different styles, different strengths and different weaknesses. I'm more of a broadsword guy than a scalpel guy. No pun intended. It's a good thing I didn't become a doctor. So my leadership style at the car wash and at the courthouse is I'm hypercritical of myself, and I know what I can't do, and it just seems that that's all my brain focuses on. And so I know I can't do really sit down, detail-orientated processes over and over and over. And so when I hire, like for instance in the car washes, I can't even change a light bulb. So when I would hire, I would try to hire people that had really strong mechanical ability. I knew that I can talk to people. I knew I can listen to somebody's problem. I knew I can say, look, let me try to fix your problem. Let's try this. If that doesn't work, we'll try that. So I would deal with the communication side of it, and I would hire for the people that I just couldn't do the job or didn't want to do the job. And it's really similar at the courthouse. I've got a great chief deputy, and I hire people that want to help people. And I hire people that have experience and have gotten really good at the things that I'm not good at. So at the courthouse, we all have our roles, we all have our lanes, and I'm probably the luckiest clerk in the state because we all get along so well. We've got a great office culture. We treat each other with respect. We treat the public with respect. I have a hard time saying I'm successful because I just don't know what success is, and I always feel that any day it could just all be pulled away from me, and I have to be on my A game every single day, and I have to kick and fight, and force my will on whether it's with the business or the clerk's office, because I don't want to fail. I don't want to fail myself. I don't want to fail my staff. I don't want to fail the public. I don't want to fail the city and city council. I work really, really hard to make sure my staff is happy and supported. I work really hard to make sure I listen to them. I work really hard to listen to anybody that comes into the clerk's office or calls or emails, whatever it takes to try to solve and fix a problem, whether it's the staff or the public or the city manager's office. I try to do whatever it is that needs to be done.
Yeah, you're always looking for more too. I mean, if you think about your story, I'm listening from the mid '90s all the way up. Wanted to be a business owner, start car washes, the lawyer, becoming a prosecutor, circuit court clerk. There's always something more that you're after. You are staying in it, to win it. What's next? You sold the car washes.
Yeah, I sold the car.
You're still with the city.
I'm still with the city, and my clerk's office is my full-time job. It's my passion. I guess since 1998, when we opened up Santa Fe Car Wash, I was so focused on making my business successful that I never developed hobbies. I tried to golf. I hated that. I tried, other stuff. And it just, when everybody else was like, let's go do this, it's going to be so much fun, I'm like, I want to have fun. And to me, I want to go to work. I want to be there. I want to see how my employees are doing and help them and work with them. I want to see how the equipment's doing. And, do we need new equipment? What do you guys need for that? And with the customers. And I always wanted to work. But at least Jeff Small can't have it all.
Right.
And the choices I've made, I don't regret. But, I can't have it all. Again, I don't have really any hobbies. When I sold the business, I was a little depressed. I was clerking, and I had on the business side of it a VP of operations, 2 district managers. Every store had a general manager and an assistant manager. And, we were doing well enough that I could create sort of a corporate infrastructure. And that's also what helped me being able to sell the business. But I needed a hobby, and, my hobby seems to be business. So Sammy T's went up for sale, 801 Caroline Street downtown. And I had no intention of buying it, but there was a gentleman that wanted to buy it. And he asked me if I would help him with financing, and I said I would. This gentleman, he's smart, he's a hard worker, and I knew he'd have been successful. So I was going to help him with some of the financing, not be a partner, but just so he'd have the money to buy the business and run it. His deal fell through, and the owners said, "Well, Jeff, you've seen the books. You obviously know what Sammy T's is. You lived downtown since 2001. Do you want to buy it?" And I said, "Al, I don't ever want to be in the restaurant business, and the bar business, forget about it." And he says, "Well, just think about it." So I went home and I told Wendy, and of course my brain's thinking, and I was sucked in. And I said, "It's directly in between my house and the courthouse. So I'll go to the courthouse every morning at 7:30. I'll work till lunch, go down to Sammy T's. They don't open till 11:30. I'll get there around 12, 11:30 or 12, spend an hour there, help them out, talk to customers. I don't know how to cook. I don't know how to make a drink. I don't even drink, but it just excited me to have a staff again and work with them and create a great culture. It just excited me to walk around and ask customers instead of this time, "Hey, how does your car look? Are your wheels clean? Hey, how did your meal come out? Did you enjoy the camper special? We've got a great hamburger. Are you enjoying it?" It was a lot of the same things, and I couldn't resist. So I bought the business in March of 2023, March 1st, and I just had my 1-year anniversary.
Congratulations.
And Ray, I'm having the time of my life. The margins aren't quite what they are in the restaurant business as they were in the car wash business, but the restaurant is profitable, so I don't have that stress. And I love it. I love it. I go there during lunch. I go there after work. I go there on weekends. I support my general manager. He's great, but he's never general manager before. So now I'll never be as smart as Carl Silver, but I'm teaching him about profit and losses and balance sheets and how to, create, team sheets and checklists. And so it's very rewarding.
Would you open up another restaurant?
Never. And please, hopefully this recording will stay in memorial. And if I ever try, somebody play this back to me.
Right. I'm sure building a restaurant from scratch is a little bit different than building a car wash from scratch.
And I got lucky. I took over a restaurant that was running great. It was profitable. It had a stable staff. So I'm just trying not to mess up, what is a Fredericksburg institution.
Yeah, it's a big spot for downtown.
Mm-hmm.
People talk about it all the time. You guys have the Camper Special, which is a talking point in terms of restaurants and food, what they offer.
You know what else, Ray? I missed. There was a little bit before COVID, but then it just sort of died off. And I know there's going to be people say, but what about X, Y, and Z? And I'm sure that's out there. But I wanted there to be more live music in Fredericksburg. So I met a guy named Seth Casana, and he's got Bigwig Productions. And somebody introduced me to him, and I said, "Seth," Wednesday nights is kind of a slow night at Sammy T's. I will commit to booking a band every Wednesday night throughout the year. And in order to incentivize people to come in to see these bands, I'll do 50% off bottles of wine. And Seth's like, "Wow, that's great." So Seth has, we've been doing it, I guess, since November maybe, but whatever. We've been having live music, and I've been amazed how talented these Fredericksburg musicians are. They're fantastic guitar players, singers, but it's so cool because it's slowly gaining traction. And now Wednesday nights, they're good nights. I don't make much more money because I'm giving away the bottles of wine pretty much.
Right.
But it's so much fun to watch my staff interact with these customers. There's just so much life. There's so much, vibrancy, in the restaurant that night.
And that's music.
Yeah, that's music. Yeah.
I think a lot of restaurants are moving towards that business model where they've got live music several days or at least on the weekends.
Yeah, Fredericksburg should be known. We're such a cool city, and we've got the university, we've got Liberty Town, we've got other great artists, we've got great musicians. Fredericksburg should be known as like one of the great live music towns, in the state or on the East Coast.
We're trying to do our part. We love the live music. The artists are really good. They're very talented. We think there's a lot of opportunity to support the businesses in the process of supporting the artist. We're excited about our live music calendar on our wearefredericksburg.com website. We're listing all the artists for free, all their gigs and where they're playing. It gets the other venues and the opportunity to see who's available, who's not playing, so they can book them. I think it'll grow. It'll take a little bit of time to pick up traction.
Yeah. Can I tell you about two of my other passions?
Please.
So in 2001, I joined the Rotary Club of Stafford. And I love the Rotary because Rotary is not a business networking group. It's not a social club. Rotary is a service organization. And I didn't want to join any more business networking groups. I've been part of those, and they're great. But, that part of my life was the box was checked. I didn't really want to join any more social clubs because in my free time, I didn't want to socialize. I wanted to work. In 2001, I had been car washing for three or so years, and Fredericksburg was they embraced me, and they supported my business, and the silver companies helped me, and Judd helped me, and so many people in Central Park helped me. And I asked Judd, I said, Judd, what can I get involved in to help the communities like the Rotary? They're great. I'll introduce you to the people there, go to a few meetings. If you like them and they like you, they'll invite you to join. And I had such a great time in Rotary. At the airport, they used to have that duck race every year where they drop all the ducks, onto the runway, and the ducks would have a number off them. And if they picked your number, you won all these great prizes. And I got to run the duck race one year. I think they call it a race because it used to be at the river. They would float down, and whichever ducks crossed the finish line. But, they moved it up to the airport, and they dropped them all from a helicopter or a plane or a crane. I think it was a crane. They dropped them from a crane. And that was a fun event. And I got involved in the international side of Rotary, and I got to go to Honduras a few times, and we would help people build houses and provide them with clean water, help them get running water and clean their water. We did an eye mission where we fitted over 1,000 people with glasses. That was run by a guy in another Rotary club locally, an eye doctor named Sam Smart. And I've been in that club since about 2012, 2013. And we do great work there, too. We give over $22,000 a year in scholarships to local high schoolers. So that's really, really cool. Watching these kids who want to do more in life, they're so excited, for the next step of life and their energy and their zeal. It's inspiring, really. I'm also on the board of Hope House, Lois Ann's Hope House. And Lois Ann's Hope House has some houses off of Lafayette Boulevard downtown, and they take in families that are homeless. And the woman that runs that is Kate Woodward, and she's fantastic. She's got energy. She's out there in the community. She's working with Micah and the other shelters and Empower House, and just doing so much. And, it's being on the board there, it's very rewarding. We meet every other month, and we're there to support Kate. She does a great job. So, if anybody out there is listening and you're looking for a place to help out financially or with your time volunteering, but you want a place that is well run, that's responsible, and that the money and the time you give are going to go to help people. It's not going to be wasted. It's not going to be piddled away. It's not 10 cents of every dollar goes to whatever. I mean, it's a really great organization, and I'm really happy that they let me be involved with that. A lot of people may have heard they do the Trees for Hope, which is they auction off Christmas trees, and we raised over $100,000 at the last Trees of Hope that was at the Woolen Mill. So those are my other two passions in Fredericksburg.
I appreciate you sharing that. I know Huntley's been a big fan of the Hope House.
Mm-hmm. And Huntley, if you're listening to this, we're still going to take you up on your offer to help us.
Well, that's great. What's next for you, Jeff?
I don't have any plans. And I've never been really a goal setter. Everyone says, Jeff, you got to set goals. What are 3 goals you want to meet? And I'm like, well, I don't want to set a goal because A, if I don't get there, I'm going to be upset. Or I don't want to be limited by that goal. What if I could have done more? I just try to do the best I can and hope for the best results and persevere. And overall, I can't complain. It's worked out. Like I told you before, I'm really, really hard on myself. Oh, Jeff, you had 8 car washes and you sold them. Yeah, but I know someone in California that has 23. Why can't I have 23? You know, Jeff, you're the clerk of court. That's great. You know, we love the reasons you decided to run for clerk of the court, and we're proud of you that you've been able to do great things with that office. Yeah, but you know, I'm not the U.S. Senator. You know, it just never seems enough, and I struggle with that. I try every day. You know, I got a little journal. I write down 3 things I'm grateful for, or 3 things I appreciate. But it's not easy. And to succeed in anything, you know, whether you want it to be business, whether you want to be a great father, whether you want to be a great fisherman, whatever it is, you've just got to put your head down. You've got to learn everything you can about it, and you just got to go out and do your best every day. I've done businesses that failed. If you put everything you have into something, you know, you want to see that something do well. And if it doesn't, it's going to affect you personally. And so I've had a lot of that as well.
I think that's good to know for anybody starting out in business, that it's not going to go as expected. A lot of people fail, but failure's a process, and you just got to keep moving forward.
But man, isn't it hard?
It is.
It's heartbreaking.
It's hard to process it in your head. Mm-hmm. You don't want to give up. I've got a mentor that says, Ray, you just got to keep moving forward. There's something ahead. Don't get hung up here. Just keep moving forward. I tell that to all the people working my organizations. Let's not focus on this. Let's just take care of it and move on. There's no reason to dwell on it.
Yeah.
Well, Jeff, I appreciate you being here and telling your story. Very interesting, and appreciate what you do for the community. I think there's so many of us that are just trying to do a little bit. I think all of it together adds up to a lot.
But Fredericksburg is a great town. I think that we sort of become acclimated in it, and we don't realize just how much community we have here that doesn't exist in other places. Sure, you're gonna be at a stop sign and the guy behind you is gonna just rail on the horn, you know, get out of my way. But for the most part, you know, in Fredericksburg, we treat each other, you know, with more cordiality, a little more respect than I see in a lot of other places in America. And when I sold my business, somebody said to me, Jeff, you sold your business. You need to retire from clerk and move to Florida or Puerto Rico. And I said, why? Fredericksburg's a great place to live. I've lived here since 2001. I've got Wendy. I've got my dogs. I've got, you know, my friends, my support network. I said, I'm not going anywhere.
I don't think I'd go anywhere either. I came in 2003. It is a totally different world than Northern Virginia. It's a different mindset. The hospitality's different. It's always been that way. I like it as you get closer to the city of Fredericksburg, like the downtown area, because there's so much foot traffic alone. I mean, there's just a lot of conversations, a lot of story sharing. There's a lot of people just like you that are involved in a lot of aspects of the community that nobody knows about. They know that they own this business, or they work for this company, or they're a broker, or they're a realtor, or they're in mortgages. But a lot of these people are really nested in Fredericksburg, in the community, doing things for the community. Nobody knows this stuff. I think the more that we were to share, you know, and that's the hard part, is a lot of us are very humble about certain aspects of what we do. I think if we were able to share a little bit more of that, I think the community could come together a little bit more. I think more people would come out of the woodwork to step up and help. I think there's a lot that we could do to improve things here.
Yeah, humility. It's a funny thing. I mean, I think you have to have it. I try to have it. Anybody that tells you how humble they are probably isn't humble. I don't think I'm a big shot. I don't want to be a big shot. I just kind of want to keep my head down and try to live my life and help others. If I'm out there helping somebody with something, that's what makes me feel good. And I think at the end of the day, all of us just want to feel good and be happy.
I think that's rooted in all of us. I think it's a good family value that's rooted in all of us.
Yeah.
And we chase it as adults.
Yeah.
Well, Jeff, I'm happy to know you and be friends with you. And
thank you, Ray.
Yeah, and definitely come into Sammy T's, and hope to catch you there from time to time.
Awesome. Yep.
All right.
If you come during lunch or come after the court's closed, you'll definitely see me there.
Good deal. Jeff, thanks for coming. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you.